afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Phillips. I'm president of Americans for Prosperity. Thank you for joining us for this discussion with a very special guest from the delegation in North Carolina. As you know, Americans for Prosperity, we've got over 3.5 million grassroots activists from every state, from every walk of life, and full-time permanent infrastructure, staff on the ground in 35 states, from Alaska to Florida, from New Hampshire to Arizona, and gosh, just about everywhere in between. Last week, the House took some action that was frankly just, we believe, disastrous as we move forward for this country. We have a special guest to talk a bit about that and kind of where we go from here and some of the other big threats, and frankly, to talk about why it's such a bad idea to spend another $1.9 trillion, especially when it's not even really related, the vast majority of it, to this pandemic. So we're going to talk about that. I'm joined by Chris McCoy, our intrepid Americans for Prosperity State Director from the great state of North Carolina. Chris, thanks for all you're doing there. Take it away.
Hey, thanks, Tim. And, you know, I want to take a moment to introduce our esteemed guest. Today we have Congressman Richard Hudson. He is the congressman from the 8th Congressional District here in North Carolina. Very excited to have him here with us. Congressman, thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day to chat with us over these important issues.
Well, it's great to be with you, Chris and Tim, and thank you for what you all do, and all those folks watching us who back at home who volunteered their own time to get out and really fight for this country and really push back against all the garbage that's coming out of Washington, the push towards socialism. You guys are standing in the gap, and I appreciate you very much.
No, thank you very much. So, you know, speaking of that, all the stuff that's coming out of Washington right now, and Tim alluded to it a little bit ago, you know, there's been some pretty big movement on some legislation coming out, and some of that involves a lot of spending, and specifically, you know, bailouts and bailing out other states and so forth. Can you give us a little bit of an insight on where you sit on those particular issues, specifically around the bailouts?
Sure. Well, Chris, last week was a bad week for America. Nancy Pelosi rushed to the floor a $1.9 trillion spending bill. They called it COVID relief, but less than 9% of the bill actually went to fight COVID. And something like less than 1% actually went to push vaccine distribution. $1.9 trillion, that's about what Congress spends in 2 years to fund the entire federal government. Just a tremendous amount of money on top of $4 trillion that we've already borrowed and spent on this COVID pandemic. So if you look at the total amount of spending with this new bill, it's 6 times bigger than Obama's stimulus bill back in 2009. I think, Tim, you're muted there.
I had the dreaded mute button on. I apologize for that, guys. I was trying not to make background noise. Very sorry. But when you're talking about this legislation, I remember 2009 when then President Barack Obama and Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, back in the day when he was majority leader in the Senate, they passed a $949 billion stimulus. That sounds almost quaint by the numbers now we're talking about, right? I mean, we're talking about multi-trillion-dollar bills, but you mentioned the bailouts for big spending states. It's right at $400 billion. And it's really not fair to a state like North Carolina. I mean, you guys, no state's perfect, obviously, but you've got a legislature that tries to hold the line within reason. And certainly it's more frugal than a state like New York or New Jersey or Illinois. But under this legislation, states like North Carolina or Florida or Georgia or Texas or Wisconsin, they're going to be sending money basically to states that are horrifically mismanaged, like California, Illinois, New York. And it's to a point beyond even spending, it's basic fairness. I mean, isn't that a fair point to make?
It's a great point to make. And again, this isn't money we've got sitting around and, it's burning a hole in our pocket. This is money we're borrowing. And, like you said, almost 400 billion going to states, 41 billion of that to California alone. California's got a $10 billion budget surplus this year. They haven't been impacted by COVID, in terms of their income and money in their budget to fund their state budget. Yet we're going to borrow money from my children, your children, and send it to California so they can spend it. A lot of this money is going to states that were shut down. A lot of it's going to states that have these exorbitant pension funds they've negotiated with their unions that they now can't afford. And so states like North Carolina, we're a right to work state. We're going to be funding these pensions for places like Chicago, New York, and other places these giveaways to labor unions. And it's just not right.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, no, I think, we've done a lot of work here in North Carolina, right, over the last decade, and we've set ourselves up pretty well. And, as you alluded to there pretty directly, we're funding these other states at the expense of states like North Carolina, who were responsible in spending early on with that front. So, I appreciate you making that point and talking directly into that, especially when it comes to the unionization aspect of it, where, we are a right to work state, right? And we are looking at having to fund those aspects online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing about this that's so wrong, in my opinion, is of the three bills that we've already, four bills that we've already passed in Congress, we still have $1 trillion unspent. And so all this money that we've already appropriated is sitting out there, including, I've got on a list here, $280 billion sitting in the Paycheck Protection Program, $239 billion for healthcare spending, 172 economic injury disaster loans still sitting there. Unemployment insurance has $172 billion. Education funding, $59 billion that hasn't been spent. And all this new money we just voted on last Friday night, I guess Saturday at 2 a.m. It's all this money for education. The president says we've got to pass it now so we can reopen schools. Well, the money, 95% of that education money is not going to be spent until the year 2022 and beyond. Most of it as far out as 2028. And so, they're calling this an emergency. They're calling it a COVID relief bill, but it's not that. It's a payoff to liberal special interest. It's money we're borrowing from our children and grandchildren.
Yeah,
it's a disgrace.
And it's worth pointing out just amplifying what you just said, Congressman. This is not just for this fiscal year. They're packing in like a Christmas tree type setting from an ideological perspective, a liberal ideological perspective. They're packing in spending for pet projects and pet states for 2022, 23, and beyond. So this is a multi-year spending spree for special interest, in this case on the left. And it really is maddening to see. If you're watching and you want to make your voice heard now that it's moved over to the Senate, click on the I Volunteer link that's appearing here in the Facebook Live, the I Volunteer link. Make your voices heard to your two senators. You can put your zip code in, and also it will connect you so that your House member will also know it in case it comes back there, or for future spending bills. They will have heard from you. It only takes about 90 seconds. It's fast, it's easy. And Congressman, I'll just mention to you, I know I was a chief of staff on Capitol Hill at one point. I know that back then, members and their staffs kept pretty careful track of the number of folks back home who were reaching out to them. And it mattered. It either encouraged them if they were doing the right thing to hear from folks, or it made them a little nervous if they were on the other side. Give us a sense if that's still the case and the impact it makes when folks take the time to reach out to their House member and their Senate members.
That's a great point, Tim. And I think it is so important that people hear from their constituents. I get about 1,000 letters and emails a week. The ones that are not from my constituents kind of go in a separate pile. The ones that are from my district, those matter. And, we make sure we get a response to everyone. But also I keep track of what's coming in, and I can't tell you that it's going to necessarily change my vote or what I'm going to do, But if a vast majority of people are writing in on a topic and they have a different point of view than the one I thought I had, I'm going to pause and take another look at it. I'm not one of these people that takes a poll before every vote. My philosophy is I was elected by my constituents to come here and get information that they aren't all privy to and make the best decisions I can based on my principles and what I think is in the best interest of my constituents in the country. So, a lot of times it's not going to necessarily change my vote. But if I'm hearing from a lot of folks and it's sort of contrary than the way I was thinking, it certainly gives me pause to stop and think about it. And I would guess that there's a lot of folks out there that maybe they don't have as strong principle.
Yeah.
And when it comes to some of these votes and your impacts, you're reaching out to them is going to have a bigger.
Yeah. A quick question. I know there's been a lot of talk about the minimum wage increase that's in this. Can you explain to folks briefly where that stands as the version that came out of House?
Encourage everyone to continue to contact your representatives. And again, the handwritten letter.
I think we might be freezing up a little bit. Congressman, on the minimum wage increase that has been in this legislation at different points, there's been a lot of discussion on it. Can you give us a sense of where that stands as well as part of this legislation?
Well, that's one where folks out there can still have an impact when it comes to the Senate, because it only takes one Democrat senator to oppose adding that minimum wage. The parliamentarians ruled it doesn't fit in the rules of the reconciliation package, and Joe Manchin, the Democrat from West Virginia, said he'll oppose it, which is good news. But that minimum wage increase would be just terrible for our country. We would lose approximately, according to the Congressional Budget Office, nonpartisan analysis, we're talking about 1.4 million jobs lost with the minimum wage increasing. There's a lot of important entry-level jobs out there, and it's working people who would be hurt the most. If you want to help folks who are on the lower age bracket or wage bracket, Donald Trump showed the way to do it through tax cuts and deregulation. We created the greatest economy any of us have seen in our lifetime. The Congress working together with President Trump. You look at what the economy was doing last January, February, we had the lowest unemployment ever for African Americans, for women, for Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans. But you also saw real wage growth. You saw people at the bottom end of the wage scale actually making more money. Their wages were going up because the economy was improving and pulling them up with it. That's the way you want to improve it. Not by setting a minimum wage, which all that will do is eliminate.
Yeah. Chris McCoy, from the standpoint of AFP North Carolina, I know that your team across the state and our field offices across that state and our activists have been very active on both the minimum wage efforts and the spending efforts. Give us a sense of what it's like on the ground with our grassroots folks. Are they discouraged? Are they in the fight? Kind of where are they right now in North Carolina?
I think I'll even think this. I know that they're in the fight. They know what we have before us. They know the consequences of these things. I talk to a lot of small business owners. My best friend is a Domino's owner in several stores there. And he was telling me the impact that moving to $15 an hour is going to have on him. It's going to cripple his business. And I've heard that from several other business owners here in the state. And then we talk about our grassroots teams and our volunteers and everybody that comes together behind AFP North Carolina and helps us, really get these messages out and contact our legislators and contact voters and constituents. They're in the fight. They understand what we have before us. They understand that, we're mortgaging our kids' and grandkids' future with this level of spending. They understand what it's going to do to small businesses when you have to jack up the minimum wage like this, doubling the minimum wage essentially at this point is something that a lot of people can't handle. And a lot of businesses specifically, we all understand that. And they're coalescing behind this. We're having a lot of activity and a lot of conversations about this. There's a lot of energy that's starting to really take hold around these issues. And it's exciting to see from that aspect of it because, people want to be engaged and they want to have their voice heard and they want to be active in this. I look for some great things coming down the line as far as where our activists are on this stuff. Hopefully, we're going to be making those differences. And, that's the key to AFP North Carolina, right? We want to take these issues, put them front and center, allow our activists to be able to engage their communities and be able to get this word out to tell them how bad this sort of legislation is. Yeah.
Congressman Hudson, I did not see the final breakdown of the vote on this $1.9 trillion boondoggle from Biden and Pelosi, but I know that the vast, vast majority of your Republican colleagues in the House voted no. Do you feel like the Republican caucus is relatively united on these kinds of issues? Because, boy, we've got some big ones coming up as well. They're talking about a lot of big pro-union stuff coming up, and we're concerned about a broader public option on the healthcare side. I mean, there's just a lot of threats coming our way. Do you feel like your fellow caucus members are pretty united at this point?
Absolutely, Tim. I'm a member of our leadership as the conference secretary. I'm also a deputy whip, and I was proud we were able to hold all of our Republicans to vote no. And really the only bipartisan vote was the no vote because 2 Democrats actually voted with us.
You know what? By the way, thank you for telling that because the vote had happened so late. I knew that I wasn't sure, but every Republican.
Yeah, every single Republican voted no.
Good.
And that was important. And frankly, I've never seen our conference more unified.
Good.
The media, I'm about to say the Democrats, same thing. The media loves to write the story that Republicans are divided. Not, there may be 1 or 2 that, have sort of gone their own path on a given issue, but our conference is united and we're together and we're going to stand against, all this that's coming from Pelosi. We also are very united on the point that we are the party of the working men and women. The America First agenda. President Trump may not be here anymore, but the America First agenda is still the Republican Party agenda in Congress, and we're going to continue to be that voice for the forgotten and the hardworking men and women out there. We're going to work hard to hold the coalition together and grow the coalition.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Every single Republican voting no. Good for the caucus and Leader McCarthy and yourself and the others. Good for the caucus, Congressman Scalise. I think back, I've been around a while, I guess, but I remember 2009, we mentioned earlier, that first vote that took place on that so-called stimulus bill. They never seemed to stimulate things. Remember, even Joe Biden back then finally had to admit sheepishly, well, we didn't have as many shovel-ready projects as we thought. Do you remember that, Congressman? I mean, I know I do, but every Republican in the House had voted no there, I remember. And it helped unite them for some of the really tough battles that were ahead on the size of government and trying to stop these top-down approaches from Washington, D.C. So that is really encouraging. Before we go, I know we've got some tough challenges. The working to get out of this pandemic, reopen the economy in a way that we need to get folks back in their lives again. There's a lot of challenges. But I know you travel your district a lot. I know in leadership, you talk to a lot of your colleagues. Take a minute or 2, if you would, and tell us why you're optimistic. Because I've talked to you before. That optimism kind of shines through whenever I listen to you. Give me a sense and give the folks watching a sense of why, despite the challenges we're facing, and they're real and they're big and the disagreements are big, but there's a lot of reason for optimism and hope in this country of ours, right?
Absolutely. You look at this last election, Republicans won every competitive race except 1 open seat in Georgia. So 28 of the 29 most competitive races around the country. We picked up 15 seats when all the critics said we'd lose 20 plus seats. And it's because we were listening to the American people, and we're still listening to the American people. We know that the priorities right now are reopen our schools, reopen our businesses, get the vaccine distributed as quickly as possible, get back to our lives. And we're going to stay focused on that. And you look at the prospects of taking the majority back in the House in 2022, just next year. I believe we're going to do it. We're only 5 votes short. If you look at redistricting, Republicans control over 170 of those seats through Republican legislatures redistricting. Democrats control less than 75. Just so structurally, we're going to be in strong shape coming out of redistricting. Then you look at the historical trends. A new president in the first midterm, their party usually loses between 20 and 27 seats in the House. So we've got that going for us. And then you look at the policies coming from the president with his executive orders and from Pelosi in the House. It's all left-wing garbage. It's all messaging, and it's things that are going to destroy jobs. It's things that are going to hurt our economy. It takes us off the path that we're on before with the America First agenda, which was secure our borders, create jobs here in this country by getting the federal government out of the way, and a strong national foreign policy. And they are moving in the opposite direction. So I think the American people are going to be with us. I think they're going to be willing to hear our case when we take it to them in the next election. And I think structurally, we're going to be in great shape to take back the House. So I'm very, very bullish about it.
Yeah. Chris McCoy, and by the way, thank you for your vote, especially. I know you were doing it anyway, of course, but just thank you. A lot of folks back home have your back when you guys are fighting the fight like you did on this 1.9 trillion. And I think about these executive orders, over 40 of them now. It's just, I'm going to be in New Mexico with our activists on Thursday, and they're being devastated in New Mexico by the executive orders that don't allow any energy exploration on federal lands, and a lot of good paying jobs, and a lot of folks in convenience stores and others who, rely on those energy jobs for customers. They're hurting because of those executive orders, and they're across the board. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we had not brought that up. Chris McCoy, go ahead and wrap up for us with the last word. Take a moment on what North Carolina AFP is doing, if you would.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Again, everybody, thank you for joining us today. AFP North Carolina, we're in the fight on these issues, and we're in the fight hard on these issues. We'd love to have, everybody partnering with us throughout this. So if you're watching this, you haven't been a partner of AFP, please click the link. There's an opportunity to get more information, and somebody from my team or myself will be in touch with you directly. But, we're going to be in this as long as it takes. We're going to have a large push, and we're excited, actually. I share the optimism of where we're going to be down the line, and all this work is going to be for a good cause with that. So with all that, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, Congressman, today. It was great seeing you again. And I look forward to seeing you in person whenever that actually is an availability coming down the line. But Tim, Congressman Hudson, thank you so much for your time today. And I appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, Congressman.